Congratulations, my acolytes of success, because you are watching the Success Channel. In today's video, I want to go over the title or subtitle B of the Federal Stimulus Package 2020 regarding the coronavirus. And I have spent a little bit of time, I don't know if you can tell, just marking all this up and getting down to business for you guys. I'm going to be answering 4 questions in this, or going over 4 principal areas that this subtitle B covers. And that is who qualifies for the stimulus, how might your stimulus be reduced if you do qualify, the delivery method, how you're getting the money, and number 4 is the tax consequences, if there be any, for the money that you get. Now, I'm also going to briefly discuss a few study tips on how you can get and dissect this information for yourself. I believe it is important to a democracy where individuals have some say in government and how we are governed, that if we want a say in our governance, that we have the tools to understand the rules. And that's why I want to give you guys a few study tips along the way. But first, this, once again, you will have the links in the description to follow along or to study this on your own. If you feel that I am in error, please let me know. I want to give you guys the tools to understand this for yourself, so you're not relying on questionable biases of those who might be trying to persuade you one way or the other. Let's get into the code and let's learn for ourselves. Now, a quick study tip is, and this is how I dissected this, how I discovered this for myself, is that when looking at, I'm going to give you a few examples here. Number 1, if you're studying these rules, I'll get to the meat and potatoes, don't worry. Think of it as one of those Russian dolls, where you have a big Russian doll, and inside there's another smaller Russian doll, and inside there's another small Russian doll. Each paragraph or section, code section, is kind of like a Russian doll, in that you have the overall section title, which tells you what the paint job of that first one and how it will look. But inside that, sometimes you'll need to reference other parts that may also appear in other code sections to understand that one. Or if you're a coder, you might think of this as variables, or if you're into mathematics. This is why I don't think law should be devoid of mathematics, because in a way, your laws are equations, and one law can become a variable to the equation of a second law. And if you're in programming, you understand variables as well, that each time you create a rule or a law, it can be a variable. And that's where we're getting into this on page 140 of it's subtitle B of the CARES Act. And this right here is interesting because this is basically an amendment of the tax code already passed by the U.S. Congress and Senate and representatives there. So this is a change to that code, or an addition to that code, and it outlines that right here in section 2201, page 140, subtitle B. So if you go to page 140, right there at the top, you see subtitle B, and it's section 2201 basically says that this is an amendment to the tax code. So that's why it had to go through all the Senate and House and ratification and presidential signatures because this was an actual amendment to a code. So just like you might amend the Constitution, it ran through similar rubric or structures. So here we are now down on line 7. We're getting into the meat and potatoes. The potatoes and meat. If you're a vegetarian, just potatoes. But, sorry, I have to throw in a little humor. It's just me. That's why you're watching, because I try to throw in a little humor here and there. Okay, recovery of rebates of individuals. We're going to get into the potatoes and sometimes the meat, if you're carnivore, omnivore. Okay, so first, qualifications. Do you qualify for the 2020 coronavirus stimulus? Let's find out by going through the code section. You can follow along. You can learn for yourself. I'm going to give you the keys of how I understand it, and you're welcome to check in on me. Page 141, line 8, or line 6, if we want to start here, it says eligible individual, which is interesting, right? Because at one point we're talking about businesses being individuals or having certain rights. But here we're going to knock it down and get more specific. For the purpose of this section, or at least, this rule, an eligible individual means an individual other than. So these people, or what have you, are not going to be considered individuals for the coronavirus stimulus. And a non-resident alien individual. So not going to get the stimulus. Any individual, part 2 or number 2, and this is comma, which we consider it to be an and. And if you look down at the next one at number 2, it ends with and. So everything after the comma is going to be considered an and because we have one and then any other comma there. So this is part of that variables or the doll, the Russian doll, in that and is now going to be applied to each thing. So it's going to be and these are the ones that are not going to get it. So you don't have to be all these things. You just have to be one. But these are the ones, and that's going to be given by how we read that first part there. Any individual with respect to whom a deduction under 151 is allowable to another taxpayer. Right? So if you're an individual who the deduction is allowed to another taxpayer, you don't get it as well as them. And they're going under a section 151, and I'm going to bring that up real quick here, and I'm going to include a link to that. Do you remember the personal exemptions? They have been taken out. But at one point, a personal exemption was worth $2,000 adjusted for inflation. However, you could not claim your personal exemption if somebody else had already claimed it on your behalf, if you were considered a dependent under these rules. And under these rules, once again, that dependent is going to be anyone who's under the age, and let's go back to it's going to be in the age, which is going to be that 17. And the third is an estate or a trust. An estate or a trust is not considered an individual and will not get the rebate. Who else will not get the rebate? If you did not file, and this is going to be, which is right here, 144, and I'll put up a better image of this, 144 right here on line 5 says alternate taxable year. So if you will be applied, you need to have a valid Social Security number. And that valid Social Security number will be evidenced on your 2018 or 2019 tax return. So you need to have a valid Social Security number, and you need to qualify in terms of income as well. We're going to get into the income. That's going to possibly reduce it, and I would think it's going to go down, and that's where I think there's a little bit of but you need to have a Social Security number on your 2018 tax return or a 2019 tax return. So let's say you're becoming a U.S. citizen and you weren't in 2018, but you are for 2019. Maybe a reason to file that tax return. If you did not file a 2018 or 2019 file tax return, they can also evidence the SSA 1099. It's the Social Security Benefit Statement. So if you received an SSA 1099 for 2018 or 2019, and you did not file a 2018 or 2019 tax return, they will use that to show the evidence of your Social Security number and, of course, the information that correlates with that. So they're going to use that information instead of a tax return. Or, right, and these are ors, so there's an or right there. So any of these are possible. You don't have to have all of them, just one, or the RRB 1099. This is a Social Security equivalent benefit statement. So if you did not file a 2018 or 2019 tax return, but you are getting those benefits and you have been issued a 1099 SSA or RRB for 2018 or 2019, then you will be eligible for it. Others who are or may not be eligible for it there is an exception. Special rules for members of the armed forces. Here we are, page 146. All right, line 5. Special rules for members of the armed forces, and basically it says that if one of you is a member of the armed forces, that only you or your spouse need to have valid Social Security numbers to get the full benefit. If you are not an active service member, if one of you is not an active service member, then both of you. So for everybody else, if you're married filing jointly, both of you actually need to have those valid Social Security numbers to get it. And also, now, if you are in a U.S. territory, so to speak, and they're specifically talking about Puerto Rico and Northern Mariana Islands, if you are in one of those possessions, is what they were calling it,